And we are live. Welcome to the Open Mic Show. I am Reagan Ram with Orpheus Audio Academy, and I'm joined by Joseph of Songwriter Theory and Chad of At Home Songwriting. Welcome in, everyone. If you have any questions, leave them in the chat, and we are going to get started answering your questions and talking about how to write better songs and more songs in 2024.
Write more in 2-4.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Write more in 2-4.
That could be a hashtag.
Interesting. Go on. I feel. What's the thought behind that?
Besides, I don't know. I was just thinking, like, every year has a a little punchline, a little kick, and maybe write more 2-4. That's maybe something, or maybe
I just it took me way too long. Like 2024 2-4 time.
Oh yeah.
Play on that? It took me until now to realize. Oh,
it's the year. Yep, we're in 2024. Joseph,
you're not one of those people that still keeps writing the previous year, the new year, are you?
Yeah.
2024 is it feels weird.
So Dean has a question. I don't know if we want to open up just talking about goals for the year, or if we want to just dive into this question first. What do you guys think?
I mean, we can go to a question and then kind of loop through, since Dean already asked. He's the first, early bird gets the worm.
Exactly. So he says, help.
Hopefully it's a big juicy worm. We'll see.
Beginner producer alert. That's awesome. Congrats on being a beginner. We were all there at one point. Yes. And can you please give us the top 5 practical workflow steps to actually mix any synthwave track?
That's really a Reagan question.
I don't know. Yeah, I can take a stab at it. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that, or if you have any experience with synthwave.
I mean, a little bit. I would say that I do have experience in mixing and doing production. I would say, I don't know if I'll have top 5, but what I've really been learning with my own music is to really focus on less is more. And really to listen to what you already have and to see what might be missing from it, right? Like, I think I have fallen into the trap of watching every YouTube video under the sun, which is funny because we're on YouTube right now. But every person who's doing, like, I'll read his question in a minute once I finish my thought. But everybody has some advice, like you should cut this frequency, or you should start mixing this, or you should do whatever. And I've gone back to really the basics of just listening to what I would call the board mix, which is just raise the faders and see what you have and see how do you feel that you might want to sculpt it. So Dean says, should you turn on all the sound levels and add one sound at a time? What dB level should we start or set to? One of the cool things that I've done to kind of teach my ear to balance in mixing is using pink noise. So I will take pink noise and I'll have it just on a channel at -12 dB, and then go through all of the tracks one by one and turn them up until they're just barely audible over the pink noise. And then I mute it, and then I do the rest. And then at the end, once you've gone through all of your tracks are kind of balanced within their own frequency range to stand out from the pink noise. So you actually have this nice balanced place to start that's actually level, or like gain staged at -12. So that's something that I've done in the past, but it's usually good to listen to everything together and then sort of mute things, I think. But I don't know, Reagan, what are kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's usually how I try to keep things around the -12 dB level. As far as like, how do you get started in the workflow steps? Actually, my free guide kind of walks through my whole mixing process. You can get that at orpheusaudioacademy.com/mixing checklist. And so then to answer your question, that's kind of the best place to start is, right, even before that, prep work is making sure your tracks are all colored, organized, grouped, named, because that can really just speed up your workflow. But then Then the first step is volume balancing. And so, yeah, it's a good idea to have, you turn everything down and then you turn up one instrument at a time. There's a couple of different ways, a couple of different schools of thought about going about that. Some people will say start with the most important instrument. So that'd be like the vocal. Other people, my mentor, for example, says start with the bass and the drums. So work your way from bottom up, mix your way bottom up. So maybe you can experiment with each of those, see which one you like better. There's pros and cons to each way to do it. And then, yeah, try to keep everything around 12 dB ish, right? Because some things are gonna be louder than other things, but that's kind of like the ceiling I try to get for the overall mix. So I don't want to go above that. So I leave enough headroom for mastering. And so then you just kind of bring up the other instruments as you go. If you're taking the instrument that's the most important, you kind of just do what's the second most important sound, what's the third most, and so on. Or if you're going bottom up, then you just go frequency wise. So you start with your drums and your bass and any rhythm elements, and then leads and vocals, mixing up that way. So those are kind of two different approaches. So maybe experiment with each one to see what you like. And then from there, it's just EQ, compression, and then effects. And that's kind of the workflow and in a nutshell.
And bouncing off of a little bit of what I feel like you both said, but going back one step farther, is arrange in such a way that it's self-mixing as much as you can. So a mistake that I made on the first album, I had it professionally mixed, the first album that I did, but we recorded it in our dorm room. And the guy was like, dude, do you put everything in the mid-range? He was like, you have guitars are in the mid-range, pianos in the mid-range, everything. And I can't speak to synthwave, so I don't know what kind of instruments you're going to be utilizing. I assume mostly synths. But think about the pitch range that you're using, and think about it. I'm working on an arranging thing at the moment, and an analogy I am kind of toying with is having different rooms. Like if you have different rooms in your house, you can only fit so many people in each room where they can actually hear each other in conversation. So try to spread it out a little bit. Don't have everything be in the same mid-range. Don't have everything be bass. Don't have everything be too high. And also, I feel like it should be kind of a bell curve where you have very little actually in the bass, and then you have the most kind of in the upper mid. So it's not a perfect bell curve, but so that's mixing,
huge.
But it's something to think about before mixing, is in that sort of arranging, actually deciding on the parts.
Element. Yeah, one other thing I'll add for synthwave, if you're doing everything in the box, which you probably are, meaning everything's in the computer, you don't have a whole this outboard gear, is even before EQ and compression, I would add saturation to just about every track, because saturation that was present in the 80s by default and before we had everything digital on computers, because you had a console, you had outboard gear, and so every piece of electrical equipment, physical equipment, the audio signal is converted to an electrical signal and has to go through those boxes of circuitry and transistors and all that stuff, and that adds what's called saturation. So that's subtle distortion and compression to each element. So you're going through the microphone, the preamp, the mixing console into a tape recorder, back into the mixing console, and then adding effects, compression, EQ, reverb, delay, all that stuff. That's all adding saturation. So if you want to create that kind of authentic sound, it's going to have, back in the 80s, everything had all this saturation baked into it before you even did any mixing. So that's something you might want to consider, is using different plugins that kind of replicate that, or just saturator tools to add saturation. That's going to make a huge difference, right? You don't want to get to the point where everything sounds distorted, but just adding that extra warmth, those extra harmonics to your sounds will make them sound a lot more authentic and synthwavy. And then
Chad, did you want to address the pink noise question?
Yeah, I was gonna. So there's different types of noise. So the noise that most everybody is familiar with is white noise. So that would be the noise that comes out of your TV when it's in between channels, or TVs used to do that. TVs now go to a blue screen and they just say no input. But back in the day, the olden days, TVs used to go shh. And what white noise is it's random it's noise of all frequencies. So there's all frequencies happening at the same level. So that's white noise. Pink noise is actually the level of each octave of frequency is balanced in a certain way, or they're at a certain level to where the frequencies are matched in volume. So the thought here is if you have a high pitched sound, it even if it's at the same level, it will appear louder to the human ear. So what pink noise has been done, it's been adjusted so the lower frequencies are higher in level, and it's sort of balanced all the way down the spectrum within that curve, or it's a slant. So it slants from 20 hertz down to like 20 kilohertz. So it's kind of it's a volume adjusted noise based on octave. Is
brown
that right?
noise would be the
Again,
opposite,
I mean, that's how I
assume,
think of it.
because I know brown noise is like bassier than white noise,
think
and I knew
the-
pink noise was another alteration on white noise, but I didn't know what
Pink
it was.
noise,
That
yeah,
was
it's just
pretty
equal
interesting.
energy per octave is kind of the
Right.
the shorthand.
So
Definition.
what's brown noise? Is that just bass accentuated of white noise? Because like thunderous, right? Like brown noise is way more pleasant to listen to than white noise. And I know it's because of more bassiness, but I wonder if it's like the opposite of what pink noise is, where instead it's like an emphasis on, I don't know.
Yeah,
So a lot of what they call like AI, like audio mastering software, you know, how you put your music in and then it masters it and it supposedly adjusts the frequencies. A lot of them start by frequency matching or EQ matching your song to a pink noise input. So what it's doing is it's trying to balance your song octave by octave so it matches the pink noise. And most speaker companies, when they tune speakers, like car companies and things like that, they use pink noise as a standard in order to tune speakers. So if you can adjust your frequency ranges to where they're sort of leveled and balanced, it's a good place to start. Not always a good place to end, because it can be sort of boring in a mix perspective, but it's a good way to sort of hear, especially if your room's not tuned. It can help you see if you have too much bass, if you have too much treble, like all of that, what's happening. So yeah, it's complicated but simple at the same time.
For what it's worth, apparently brown noise is pink noise on steroids, because it has even more of an emphasis. It's even steeper of a curve where it's really bass accentuated, according to one chart, which I will assume is correct.
Also, Dean, thank you so much for the super chat. That really means a lot. Thank you so much.
Woo. Reagan has himself a super fan.
Awesome.
It's good stuff. I've experimented with all different types of noises for risers and such.
Technic Tone says Sound Toys Decapitator is great for saturation. That is definitely a great one. I've not used it myself, but I've had a lot of people say good things about it.
For saturation, I've used Waves Audio. If you want tube saturation, their Magma plugins are really nice tube. I've also used Black Box through Plugin Alliance as a saturator. I have the Abbey Road saturator from Waves too, but that seems to be really distorted really fast, so it doesn't add as much subtle saturation for me, but I think it really works well if you're doing like really in-your-face drums. But I haven't used it too much to really know.
Yeah, and every DAW probably has some saturators built in. I know Logic has a lot of hidden saturator tools. For example, the compressors can be used as saturators. There's a I guess what's called a distortion knob on those. There's like soft, medium, and hard or something. And so if you like put it on soft, and then it'll add some saturation. They also have their vintage EQs. So you think this is just EQ, right? But no, if you actually turn the I forget what they're called each one. If it's like, it might be input, or it might be, I think it's called like input or something, or gain. If you just turn that up, no, it wouldn't be gain. I think it's like input. If you turn that up, that'll actually add some saturation as well. So each DAW probably has some saturator tools built in if you just want something that's free.
Can I share my? I found a picture of pink noise actually.
I think you can. I think it should pop up.
Oh, did we fix that since last time? I thought
Did
last
it-
time we couldn't do that, or am I
Oh,
misremembering?
did we not? I thought we were able to do that.
I do see that I have a present button, so I assume Chad does too.
Let's see.
Yeah, I can add that.
Woo! Nice.
Can you see that? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's pink noise. So that's, see how it lower sounds. The reason why it goes down is because the higher the frequency, the more loud it appears to the human ear. So what pink noise does is by lowering the higher frequencies, it has the same apparent level, or it has the same volume as the other frequencies. So that's what they mean when it's a balanced frequency level.
If you let bass get out of control, your mix is just shafted, because bass is way louder and affecting your speakers way more than what you actually hear.
Right. And this all comes back to the Fletcher-Munson curve. Let's see, can I zoom in? I was just trying to find a website. This thing's spaghetti model here, which if you live in Florida might trigger you. But what this is depicting is how the human ear perceives different frequencies at different volume levels. So, right, so pink noise is equal energy per octave. And so you think, well, shouldn't it be flat all the way across? So the reason it's like that is because we actually hear higher frequencies better than lower frequencies, right? You know, this is true. If you turn down a song, listen to it at a low volume level, the bass kind of disappears. So that's what you see here. You're kind of losing the bass, right? So the horizontal frequency, or the horizontal here, the x-axis is frequency, and then the y-axis here is volume level. So the volume level we hear the best is like right around 1K, and you hear the most accurately all the frequency levels at about 85 to 90 dB, which is why when you're using EQ, you actually want to make sure you crank your monitors up to 85 to 90 dB. And then the rest of the time when you're mixing, you can mix at lower volume levels. But if you're making EQ decisions at a lower volume level, then you're probably going to be putting in too much bass because you're not hearing enough.
Yep. And everything sounds better loud, but that's not a good thing when you're mixing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ear fatigue, hearing loss. That's all. It's surprising how many music like YouTubers I've heard talk about how they're losing their hearing. I don't know if you've come across this. So it's that's something you gotta be careful of, is protecting your hearing. Yeah, no, like Adam Ivy says he lost his hearing. Andrew Huang says he was, I don't know if this is still the case, he was losing his hearing. Someone else said they were losing their hearing. It's a music YouTuber. Anyway.
What?
Interesting.
Sorry, dad joke.
The worst part of that is I feel like there's no way to know, because theoretically you don't think it's that loud if you are listening loud enough to damage your ears.
So right? I actually use a sound level meter. And I had read somewhere that like Serban Gania, who's one of the top mixers, he mixes at around 65 dB. So I try to stay like 65 to 75. So I actually measure it, and I can tell when my ears are getting tired because I feel like I want to turn it up, but I always go back to like, what is the level? And this thing was cheap, and you can get apps on your phone that do it. About it.
Yeah. I have a free app on my phone to measure. So yeah, that's about right about the volume level you want to listen to. Basically, you want to be able to have a conversation with someone else in the room without having to raise your voice. That's like what you typically mix at, except when you're using EQ, right? When you go to make those EQ decisions, you crank it up and then you turn it back down.
And what I've been doing too with mixing is I will mix for 20 minutes and then I will take a 5-minute break, and I'll set a timer for each of those, because I'm notorious for mixing until like literally I'm going crazy and everything sounds the same, and then I'm tricking myself. And it's been a really good exercise to like set a timer for 20 minutes, stop, then set a timer for 5 minutes, and then go back and do that. And that actually has helped me go longer before I actually lose my objectivity, which has been good.
Definitely, which is why counterintuitively, sometimes you actually produce better quality music when you mix fast than thinking, oh, I'm really going to take my time on this and spend a lot of time on it. Well, no, because you're working against the clock anytime you mix, because you're going to lose your objectivity. You're going to get listening fatigue, and everything's going to start to sound the same, and you can't really tell a difference, and you're going to think you're going crazy. And that's the same for the pros who, work in big commercial recording studios. They know that they got to go quickly, and they know if they hit a wall, sometimes they just have to stop and come back the next day.
Yep. Cosmic's Music says, great idea. Lose track of time while producing. Occasionally everything sounds the same. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're not alone. You're not alone.
Yeah.
Or
mixing is one of the more maddening processes, just because of the. I think mixing is one of those. I don't know if it's an exception to what most things are. At some point, there's always diminishing returns, but I think diminishing returns hits way sooner than you would think for mixing. So, like, for example, I would argue that the vast majority of the time, at least lyrics that took 30 hours are going to be better than the ones that took 30 minutes. At some point, there is diminishing returns for sure. I don't know when that hits. Maybe it's at hour 10. Maybe it's at. I don't pretend to know where that is, but it's way later than it is for mixing for sure. Like, you can tell, or I feel like usually you can tell for like lyric writing or something. This was written in 2 days, and this was written in over the course of months, taking their time. But mixing is one of those where, like, if it was mixed in 2 hours, that's probably great. Like, which is I feel like that's a hard, especially for those out there that are songwriters and trying to produce their own music and mix their own music. I feel like that's a hard shift sometimes to make. Not to mention, like, you're wearing a different hat, right? Even between something like songwriting and producing, it's not the same hat. Like, theoretically, you could be a great producer and a terrible songwriter, or vice versa, because it's just a totally different skill set, in the same way that mixing is a totally different skill set with different rules and different traits in a person that would be better for mixing or worse for mixing. Like, for mixing, maybe impatience would actually be helpful. I would argue for songwriting, it's probably not. But yeah, Elliot
Tecumseh Thorpe, excellent name, by the way. It's, Elliot Easton, guitarist for the Cars, recorded their first album in 11 days and then mixed in 9 days. So yeah, mixing, you're probably gonna, depending on how much you're doing, but yeah, 1 day per song. I've seen that. That's pretty common. Because you do want to get that right at the source. And and going back to what Joseph said with arrangement, so you really want to set yourself up with your recordings and then the arrangement, so that you have to do as little mixing as possible. In fact, I don't know if I should say this, but the song I recently released, a Christmas song I released, I didn't really mix. I wrote it and then I just released it the next day. And it's actually my most popular song now. So, technically I probably mixed it somewhat. Now, there's no vocals, and all the instruments were virtual. They're all just synths and stuff. So, when you're using, virtual instruments, that requires less mixing than if you're recording raw instruments and especially vocals. So, but that's just something to keep in mind if you're using a lot of virtual instruments or samples. Then that cuts down on the mixing you have to do.
Yeah. Also, on the Cars story, just as a maybe aside, always be careful what lessons we get from, like, a certain pro, like any certain pro, right? Because there's always going to be an example of anything, right? There's probably an example of an all-time great mixer who's like, oh, I take a month for every song. It probably exists. I don't know if it does, but in the same way, right? It's just be very careful to not over attach yourself to a way that a band that you liked did it, because there's a lot of factors, right? And in some cases it might be, how many instruments are they using? If they're using way more instruments than you, then maybe it should take them longer to mix because there's just more stuff to do. Or if there's fewer instruments, it might be more self-mixing. Or to Reagan's point, it's more self-mixing if you're using VSTs. which I think is partially why so many like all the famous like EDM producers, I feel like a lot of them kind of mix their own songs. So it's kind of this hybrid of like they produce, they write, and they also mix. But it's like it's easier to be a mixer of that compared to somebody who's trying to mix, I don't know, electric guitars that were recorded in an imperfect room, and the amp kind of has some weird issues because it's an old amp. So just be careful about don't with any example, right? I mean, because people do the same thing with like, oh, music theory isn't useful because some artist I like didn't know it. Like, just be very careful to ever go down that road for anything. So Tecumseh Thorpe, just think about like what feels right for your song would be my side recommendation.
I think that's the key with all of this. I think that's the key with songwriting. I think it's the key with mixing. It all comes down to what is getting the right emotional reaction that you're looking for, right? Like, I don't think it has any. I don't think time necessarily is the factor that makes something good or not. I think it really depends on like the performance. It depends on just how it came out. Like, I do think there are times where you literally could write a song in 10 minutes and that's probably as good as it's going to be. I also think there's songs that if you spent like 6 months on it, you're wasting your time throwing glitter on a turd, right? Like, that song is not going to get better than it is. You have to like know when it's really a turd and you have to just flush it.
For sure. Yeah. I'm not sure I agree on the first one, but the second part is
I saw that eye roll.
Well, I know
that was not an eye roll. That was a eyebrow raise, if I remember correctly.
That's because when I watch your videos, Joseph, that's the thing that I'm like, I totally disagree with you.
I have to side with Chad on that
disagree
one
on that.
I have to side with Chad. It depends on the song, because sometimes you're just capturing the muse. Sometimes it comes to you, and it's
but
great.
the muse is the exception,
and the more you do. I don't know. That's how I write all my songs for the most part.
I would say this. Everything has to have like a average time, or like, for instance, can you write a book in a month? Yes, but probably if you were to average out 1 trillion books written in a month versus the ones that they took the full year and did the full editing, I would guess that on average, the year-long books would absolutely obliterate all the NaNoWriMo books. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't some NaNoWriMo books that are way better. There aren't people that, kept, whatever the phrase is, they had a losing hand, but they kept doubling down with a bad book for the year-long one. But I think there's something to be said for some form of bell curve of time on average. I mean, I do think that's almost a rite of passage that at some point you write a song that magically comes together in like half an hour, and it really is lyrically and everything but I think most of the time, especially for lyrics, on average, I just would be very suspicious of lyrical quality if on average it took an hour to write lyrics.
Yeah.
I'd like to see an exception to that. So far,
I think it just depends.
See,
I don't think that's necessarily true.
Maybe
I don't think that's true either, because first off, who's the judge of what's good and who's bad, what's good and bad, right? Like, there's no science behind it. It's all just art.
Because but that doesn't mean that it's fully subjective. It just means it's very hard to have that discussion. Right?
So, but if you're taking a month to write a song, because I honestly, like, I'm asking this as like, I'm curious, because if it's taking me a month to get a song to where I think it's actually decent, like, I would be so bored with it, I would have thrown it away long before a month. So I'm curious from you, Joseph, at a month, if you're spending a month working on a song, at that point, what are you actually adjusting at that point?
Well, it's not necessarily active work, right? It's a part of it is waiting for the right idea that will carry it. So for instance, you might have a situation where you just have the bridge lyric is just not working and you don't know exactly why. And, you can put in some work and try to figure out, okay, what really should the bridge be saying? Because clearly what I'm trying to say here just isn't quite right. So sometimes it's just like time. It's not necessarily like active work. I honestly have no idea on the actual number of hours that it takes on average. I know music is way faster than lyrics. And I'm usually suspicious of lyrics that I feel like I'm naturally suspicious of any situation where that isn't the case, because I think music is something where like it's just easier and more natural to come up with. For instance, you could argue that on average, if you have, let's say, just a verse, a bridge, and a chorus, you have to write 3 melodies. And you could argue that if it's A, B, A, B, you effectively have to write 2 phrases times 3, 6 phrases, and your song is done. Right? So all you need is 6 good phrases, and the music is done. For lyrics, that's not true, right? Like there's always going to be more to it than that. So, so when I say taking longer than an hour, or I don't know exactly the number of hours that it takes, but it's some blend of working on it until it gets in the right direction, letting it sit for a while, because I'm never working on one song at a time. Like never. I would once in a great while I'll take like 3 days in a row and work on one song, but for the most part it's pushing on the song that feels like it's most likely to go well that day, combined with, if it's a song that I think is one I want to be on a EP that's happening sooner, then I'll put more effort into that. But
do you instantly think then, if you just pooped out a song, like let's say you wrote a song tonight and you're like, wow, I just like the muse struck, I wrote it. Do you instantly think then that first verse isn't the best it could be?
No, I think there's a sense of when a line says what exactly it needs to say and when it doesn't. Actually, now I'm in the habit where I will take the text in my Google Doc and I will change it to green when I say this lyric it's exactly what I want to say. That way I know, don't even like, this is set, we're good. I think it's way less likely that that's going to be the case, but it can happen. It has happened. I just think it's the exception, not the rule.
That's interesting.
But
For me,
it
I would
depends
say it's
too
the
on like
opposite.
how.
I would say for me, the rule is the less time I spend on something, the better quality it is. Which I know sounds really counterintuitive, but that's probably true like 80% of the time for me.
Musically or lyrically?
I would say both.
Musically makes more sense to me than lyrically.
I would say both, actually.
I don't
But
necessarily.
that could just be me. I think everyone has a different style, so I don't think there's any real hard or fast rule there. But I've been a writer. I've been writing before I did music. I've been writing since I was in middle school. I've written a bunch of novels, been in competitions. So I've been writing for a long time, written probably 1,000 blog posts at this point in my life. So that could be part of it too. I've lots
very different writing though, right? I mean, I feel like
true, it is a different style.
I do compare it to novel writing in some ways, but in some ways it's very different, right? Novel writing is more.
But I know even with novel writing, because I've gotten some coaching in that area for how to go about publishing novels, and they even say like you gotta keep it going, even in the editing. Like that should only take a month.
No, that's what I'm saying though. Like I just don't think that equates, because if you think about,
you don't really want to spend a whole year editing, because then you're probably being inefficient. You're probably getting too down in the weeds. And as I think it was Napoleon Bonaparte said, that quantity has a quality all of its own. And so at some point, especially in the indie realm, if you're wanting to really put out content, put out your books, your music, which is kind of volume is kind of important for building a fan base, building a career, then you can't really get bogged down too much. But
now you're talking
I definitely hear what you're saying too.
There's a big difference between the artistic quality of something and what is best for somebody to become popular. Those rules are wildly different. I don't even think it's related. I think there's no connection whatsoever. None. Right? Like you could pump out a song a day, and absolutely that will help you get more popular, whether or not your songs are better. But it is just like more, I mean, it's like YouTube videos, right? At some point, if you put out enough YouTube videos, quality matters for sure. But like to grow your YouTube channel,
I think
you're not going to like make one great YouTube
the
video that is just going to take off.
I think in the beginning, for most things, you need to focus on quantity. And
Sure.
then once you master that, you focus on quality. And then once you're a pro, once you're an expert, then you do both. I think that's what we see. Like the people that are really skilled, they've mastered both quantity and quality. Now music's a little different, right? Especially if you're looking at like pop stars, but like for like people in the indie world that are successful, whether it be novelists, whether it be music artists, they've mastered both of those.
Yeah, I the thing about it, what I don't want newer writers to hear is that you need to trust your own artistic judgment. Like the song needs work if you think it needs work, right? Like if it's good and you like it, don't question your judgment unless you get feedback from somebody else who thinks they know what they're doing. But the thing is nobody knows really what they're doing. So I've seen a lot of people get really paralyzed in their creativity because they try to spend so much time on a song when really what they should be doing is trying more songs and really getting a sense of what tools actually work and what actually like gets them to where they want to go. I think the thing about it for me is it's like you sort of get the more that you do it, you become a better writer and eventually you write better songs, right? I think the first step is becoming good at the process and then you start to think about the results, right? I don't think there's very many people who write 4 songs and those songs are the best thing that have ever happened to everyone. Like it just doesn't work that way. Most people that you hear that become professional songwriters will tell you they have been writing songs since they were kids or they've done it for years and years. So it's not that because if you're very inexperienced, how do you even know what to adjust, right? It all comes down to, does it fit what you want to do? So what Joseph, what you're saying is you're like, well, I don't think the bridge is saying what I wanted to say. That's different than focusing on some imaginary like quality standard, right? Because the quality standard is always changing.
Yeah, if you're not happy with it, by all means,
I'm making a value judgment of the quality of my bridge, right? I could pump it out that way, but I know that it's not working. So like it's still a quality judgment. It's
right.
Just
yeah.
If a part of it is going to be like it's like anything else, right? You can dive as deep into the crafting versus just go as you want. And I agree with I think pretty much everything you guys just said. Where like early on, you should focus on quantity. I less agree with the quantity leads to quality. I think I understand that almost all those trite phrases are not technically true. They just like have elements of helpful truth to them. But I think like, okay, I keep writing songs in 15 minutes. Let's see if that really is true. And I'm sure it's not. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe everybody should just write a song a minute until it finally works. But I know that's taking the claim to an extreme, but that's what you do when somebody makes a claim, right? It's like, well, at the extreme, it's definitely not true. So it makes it arguable whether it's true at all. But
go ahead. I didn't.
Yeah. So to me, like a part of the writing / crafting process is making value judgments like that, and not like there's just going to be a different standard that everybody has too, right? And to one of you said it, I think Reagan said style comes into it as well, right? If like for all the people that think simple is good, I disagree fundamentally. I don't think that's true. I don't think the opposite is true either, but some people think that. If you're a person that thinks that, then yeah, probably you're more likely to get a lyric that to you is earlier on, because we think simpler by default, right? We talk in simple language, relative at least to what we would consider flowery or poetic. But poetic is always going to take longer. If you lean into more poetic, flowery language, that is probably going to take longer most of the time. But a part of it too is just there has to be some element of course, everything, how much you put into it is going to show to a degree, right? So to my original point that I think this whole side tangent / discussion came off of, to me, there has to be some form of bell curve where, like, I don't buy that, like, in the first hour is where the bell curve is like, oh, your song after the first hour, it's probably going downhill now. You're probably tinkering with something that's good as it is, and it's just getting worse. I don't think that's true.
I think it depends. It just depends on the song. I think that's all we're saying is just depends on the song. If
but of course it depends on the song.
Yeah, some songs I've really had to labor through, and it's like it's just not coming.
Well, I never said that every song this is true. I said on average. My original comment was that on average, a song absolutely I think takes more than like an hour to get it to where it needs to be. And I said I don't know what the number is. I threw out the number 40 hours. It's probably less than that. I don't really know. But it's maybe around 10. I definitely don't think it's 1. I know that I don't think it's 1. I'm fairly confident that it's not 1, at least on the lyrical side.
So
I don't know where the number is, but there has to be an average, right? Like there has to be, which is maybe worth thinking about at least. Because I don't know. To me, like if a songwriter is out there and they're like, every song I writes half an hour, to me that's a flag. If nobody has ever written a song that took them more than a half an hour, I immediately question what the highest quality they ever got to was. Partially because I've seen many of those songs, and usually it's like, yep, I can tell that you wrote that in a half an hour, which if they're fine with that is fine. But like there is an element of like crafting versus just writing and being done. I think on average you can tell.
But I think it matters how many half an hours sessions there have been.
Sure.
Because someone who has 10,000 half-hour sessions is going to probably write better than someone who has 50 half-hour sessions, right? One of the things that I notice in the lyric class that I teach for Berkeley is the students write something every single day, 5 days a week for 12 weeks. So every day they're writing something. And there is a marked difference between the things that they write in week 1 versus what they write in week 12. So I do think there is a quantity skill-based thing versus the time as well, but it depends on what you're focused on. If you're just going in and going off your own instincts, and if you start off on the wrong foot, you're going to just do a lot of practicing of bad technique or bad skill, right? Sure. But I think what Reagan was saying too with novel writing, with like screenplay writing, with, you know, those types of things, there are definite tools and techniques and tendencies that people can learn. So it doesn't have to take them a long amount of time. So they can worry about the content instead of the structure, because I think there's a separation between that as well. So if you know the structure and you know what are options and what tools you have in your toolbox, you actually can write better, faster, I think.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever said anything that opposes that, right? But there's a big difference between saying, like, of course, I think I did an episode or something about this recently. Like, if you were to find a way, if you were to find a way to measure a songwriter, it's got to be quality of songs over time, right? A songwriter who pumps out 10 great songs in a year and that's it is a better songwriter than one who pumps out 1 great song a year. A songwriter who pumps out 100 average songs in a year over 10 average songs a year, first one's better. Where it gets more interesting is, you know, somebody could pump out a song a day, but if they're all like, nobody would ever want to listen to them, versus somebody who pumps out 10 songs a year, but they're all pretty good. What's better, right? Like, and that's where it becomes an interesting, which it's not about that, right? It's just about like, you have to push, I think, in both quality and quantity. And I think all of us are maybe start being resistant to, because we're all going to start in one camp or another, right? It seems to me that especially when we start, most of us are either over tinkerers by default or people who just don't want to be told that, hey, if you want better quality, to some degree, time is going to play into it. And I think depending on which type we are, we should push in the opposite direction. So for me, I put a concerted effort into pushing on quantity because I'm by default somebody who like I want to get it exactly right as I define it. And for other people like me, then yes, we should concentrate on efficiency. But I think the opposite is true too, because I don't know, like of course it is. Like I think it's just one of those things where like for everybody, you need to figure out where you are on that spectrum and then push in the opposite direction. Because anybody who does write every song, or if somebody out there writes most of their songs in an hour, that's fine. But like I would argue you can learn a lot and you might grow as a songwriter more so if you started pushing more on the quality and focusing on crafting the details more. Whereas somebody like me who has leaned towards being an over tinkerer,
we might have to agree to disagree and move on. I will say real quick, sometimes a situation forces your hand though. You don't really have the luxury of time because sometimes I work freelance for a local studio as an arranger, and this one client, they only had, they wanted me to write some songs for them. They only had the budget for 2 hours per song, so I had to write 2 different songs in 2 hours per song, so a total of 4 hours. And so I had to get that written and delivered to the client. And that's just kind of sometimes when you're working in the music industry, your kind of time is limited and you're kind of forced to get things done. So
it's a separate point, though.
That's something else to consider. But we might have to agree.
That has nothing to do with the core of the argument. Now you're just going on tangents that have nothing to do with the initial point at all.
I think that's
obviously totally different because you just have to do it for financial. Like
I just don't.
I think they were good songs though. I think they were some of my best songs.
Yeah,
and they might be.
Yeah. I just don't think that people should put a stopwatch on their creativity. So like saying that like if everybody writes songs in an hour, well, how can those songs be good? Sometimes they are, you know what I mean? Like sometimes they really are. So I worry that if someone out there writes a song in an hour, they would doubt that it's good because somebody on YouTube says, well, if you wrote it in an hour, it can't be that great, right? But what if it is?
I think every song is different. I think I agree with.
Okay, first of all, I've never said the thing you just said, just to be very clear, and I never will say that. But if all of your songs take an hour, I feel like I made my point clear.
I don't think any. I think we all are close to agreeing here. We coming out from different angles. Because, I don't think any of us are saying it all should always be in one way. I think every song's different. Or I think Tecumseh Thorpe sums it up well. He says, I'm thinking of lots of stories of artists talking about how their greatest songs just came to them in an instant, right? I think we can all know stories of artists that wrote a song really fast and it was great. Other stories where they had parts of their greatest songs that sat for years and they couldn't put all the parts together. And, it took them, many times because others were needed to finish them. So there's all kinds of stories. Like I had this song for 10 years and I was worked on it for 10 years on and off and finally released it. And it's this big hit. Other people, it was really fast. So I think every song's just different. Every situation's different.
I think to the point of what was brought up about some artists say it comes to them in an instant. I think what Joseph is actually saying is like just because your idol says that they did that doesn't mean you necessarily can do that. I think that's might be what you're saying too, right? No.
Oh. Again, I've had the magical, like it came together in a half an hour and it was great as is. What I'm saying is that I don't believe that's the average experience. I think that happens. I think probably everybody, if they write songs for 5-10 years, they will have that magical song that comes together and works within a half hour or an hour, and it's great. Where I think most people go wrong is they start to think, oh, that's how all songs should be. And I think that if anything, that's the exception, not the rule. And everybody who tells them, oh, like songs should take an hour, to me, that's saying that should be the rule, not the exception. And I just think for anything creatively, that's always going to be the exception, not the rule. Like the painting that they thought of and just did in 10 minutes and it's their greatest painting. That happens. but I don't think it's something where like that's going to be the average experience. And I'm not saying the average is going to be like 500 hours and take you years either.
Yeah.
But I think, again, to what I said now multiple times in perhaps different ways, but like whatever category a songwriter is in, I think they need to work on pushing in the direction that they are not naturally. So again, in my case, I 100% concede that I have leaned towards tinkerer, which is why now I try to do a song sprint once a week to push on the efficiency side. But I think that that goes in both directions. And I would say that it would be unwise for somebody who writes like, because sometimes I'll get like emails or something where somebody will like brag about like, oh, I write all my songs in a half an hour. That's fine. But in almost all cases, I think, well, you're a person then that should push yourself to try to craft more and work on the quality side instead of the quantity side, in the same way that I'm a person that needs to push in the opposite direction. I don't think like everybody should just push towards efficiency. Like that's obviously not true. And then just connecting to what somebody said earlier, like, yeah, it's true that like the more books you write or the more songs you write, on average, it should take you probably less time. I think that's true. But at some point, it like you can't write so many books that eventually you write a book in a day, right? That cannot be done. Like literally your fingers cannot even move that fast physically.
Oh,
So, like Brandon Sanders,
authors that have
okay,
done that.
regardless, you know that my
So-
central point is true. So like Brandon Sanderson has written a ton of books. I think he's a better writer now than he was before, but like it's not like he pumps out 10 books a year now. He still, for the most part, does the
I
one
think
book
it
a
also
year,
depends
and he
on
has
what your
some
goals are.
exceptions, but
What your goals are influences too.
Well, I think we're all saying the same thing, though, that it really comes down to the song, right? And I don't think we've talked about this before, too, where it's like you don't want to paint yourself as this is the writer that I am, because you have to sort of adjust to what the song is wanting to do, right? Like some songs might just be complete. They're just done. And others are like, they need to be watered a little bit before they grow, which is both ways are right? Like everything is right. I think
that's what I've been saying. You guys have been the ones that are saying like, oh, I don't know if a song takes 40 hours. Just to be clear, I've been the one that has been saying both have their place since the beginning. You guys have been saying, oh, I think it's a flag if it takes you more than 10 hours. So for the record,
I don't remember
that's what
saying
I said.
that.
That is not what you guys said. And we can go back and review the tape because you guys immediately went down my throat when I said my initial point was that, hey, on average, I think the bell curve is like probably 10 hours are where most songs maybe sit. And you guys were like, no. So for the record, everyone can go review the tape. Your nuanced take is what I have been saying for the past 20 minutes.
No, what I was doing, I was
okay,
just
regardless.
I was starting this giving you crap that sometimes I don't agree with what you say on your YouTube videos, but that's okay because nobody's right or wrong because there's no rules in any of this, right? Like it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's multiple ways to be successful when it comes
Don't
to
worry,
music.
I won't, Tecumseh. I will not. Especially when my view is blatantly misrepresented. I will never back down. That's not a thing that I ever let happen.
Hey, you gotta have some villains in your life, Joseph. We can be the villains.
That is not my goal here. I don't want any. I don't need any villains. But I do recognize that I am in. This take of mine is one of those that is not the popular thing to say. If you look at your like any songwriter, YouTuber, I'm probably the lone or close on my side that I think most people should be spending more time. And I recognize that and I embrace that. I don't buy that just because a lot of people
don't
say
change. Don't change.
True.
No,
I'm not going to.
I love that you have a different opinion. Love it.
Right.
So then I guess we probably
also I think we should call out that Technic Tone said something fantastic that I noticed a while ago, but it should be called out. Some songs need to brew, others pour out of you. That is fantastic.
I think that's what we all said at some point.
It's well, yeah. Again, that was my point from literally the first thing I said, maybe second. I just think it's a really clever coffee-esque way to put it, and I thought it deserved a call out because it it's so short but so clear. Well said, Technictone.
Maybe Technictone should be hosting this instead of us.
Yeah, he should be
more,
on here.
More succinct and brief, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
ironically,
it's not like we're ignoring.
We're spending an hour talking about
one.
one subject. We should just answer it in one sentence, like Technictone.
I mean, I think it's an important subject, though, right? I mean, it's. I don't know. I think it's an important subject. But,
it is.
Maybe he's talking about beer. That's it. It doesn't. Either one works. I prefer the coffee one, but that's okay. Either one is.
Depends on what your beverage of choice is.
Yeah. Some songs need. Yeah, it could be either one. Now I'm curious, Technictone, if you're still here, let us know which one you were thinking of.
All right, so we move on to another subject?
Yeah.
Well, you must have another subject since you want us to move on to one.
I don't know if this is...
What if we like getting Joseph riled up?
I don't know if this topic is good or I need to read the room better. But how do you finish more music faster in 2024?
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I can start with just what my plan is, and you guys can bounce off of that, what your plan is or thought on it or whatever. So I actually started this late last year, and Chad was one of the people that I forget. I think it was in our stream that was just together, but did get me thinking about how I did need to concentrate more on the efficiency and just kind of get it outside. Which again, I agree with. So because of that, I decided once a week I want to try to aim for what I call a song sprint, which is literally I set a timer on my phone for an hour and force myself to start to finish a song. So far, my experience has been that the music is usually fine if pared down from what I would usually do. Like, for example, usually it results in like closer to a 4-chord song. It's more rare that I will have a bridge that has its own interesting piano part and a verse with its own interesting piano part. So it tends to be a little more bare bones or whatever. And then the lyrics usually need more work, but it's a great exercise to just get out of your own head. So that's a once a week thing that I have. And then 3 times a week recording and 3 times a week at least songwriting. And when I say songwriting, I mean like the process that I would normally do, which may involve editing the lyrics that I did in the song sprint. But there's something that I started at the probably November, maybe. I think it's been going really well, especially for those of you out there maybe struggling with finding time. For what it's worth, I do it at 11 to 12. That's like my time every night because everybody else is in bed. What else better are you going to do at 11 to 12 o'clock at night? And also, like, I find an hour. Well, sure. Also, like, there's something about an hour that I think it's a lot of people. We can discount an hour, like, in order to songwrite, I need like 30 hours straight. I need a whole weekend by myself in a cabin in Maine. But like, you'd be surprised how, maybe give yourself 10 minutes where it will take a little while to get ticking, but by minute 10 or so, often you're really getting going. And then also with recording, an important part, because anybody who follows my channel at all knows that I'm very upfront about my bugaboo is recording, not writing. Finishing songs is not necessarily a problem that I have, but recording of really vocals is my thing. But Reagan pointed out I have my guitars back there and joked that I was trying to I forget what the joke was. Basically, I'm
Joseph's flexing with all his guitars in the background.
Yeah. But actually, the reason is this is where I record music, and this is my vocal booth right here that you can see. This cloth.
More flexing.
So literally, yes, my vocal booth. That's from $20 Amazon packing blankets. That's super flexing. But anyway, the guitars are back there literally because I'm trying to reduce the friction to recording. And now, if I want to record guitar, I have my audio interface right here. I grab a guitar from right there. Just taking that little extra time. It's a Laguna to answer to Cum's question that I see pop up. Yes. I don't know why I second thought that for a second. I wish it was a Taylor. I love Taylors. I like the Laguna a lot, but Taylors I love them. But anyway, reduce the friction as well is another thing that I've been concentrating on that may help somebody out there. Reduce the friction to writing more, reduce the friction to whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, anything you can do to figure out what the obstacles are and then remove those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Read Atomic Habits is what I advised somebody in a
yes,
coaching call recently.
it's a great book.
Atomic Habits is one of the most revolutionary books I've ever read. And I've read a lot of those books. A lot.
Yeah, we got a couple of questions. So Rainy Dev asked, what's the best place to start learning music theory for great melodies? But then related to what we were just talking about, Michelle asks, I want to know how to finish more good songs, and how do I know if they're any good? Is there a barometer?
Michelle's just trying to start a flame war.
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
I think it's a good question.
if you like it,
Both good
if
questions.
you like it a lot and you can't stop listening to it, that's kind of my barometer. Because if you are a human being, which I assume you are, then you're probably not too weird. You're probably not too crazy. We're all crazy. We're all weird in our own way. But what I mean by that is probably other people that have similar taste to you. And so if you really like the song, other people will probably like it too. So that's the barometer I use.
That's definitely the barometer. I also think that if you have any people that you can play songs for and get their feedback, but even more importantly than getting feedback is if you're playing your song for someone and there's a part where you actually feel yourself internally cringe and like every part of your body tenses up and you're like, oh, I like something feels weird about that part. Pay attention to what that part is, because that's something that you would probably want to work on. Like, is it lyrical? Is it melodic? Like what really is there to work on? So I think that's one thing. The whole idea of good songs is so like subjective to each person. So it's hard to say like what makes a good song. But I think what has been helpful for me over the years is using songs that I really like by other writers as a structural template.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to write with maybe using their rhyme scheme, or maybe using like the structure of the melody, like not actually copying the melody, but most songs have some sort of melodic pattern where, there's only a couple different phrases. Joseph talked about this earlier in this stream, where there's really only a couple different melodic motifs within each section. So you're not really writing a huge amount of melodic stuff. And I personally think most people have good lyrical ideas. I think one of the quickest ways to improve your songwriting is to get better at melody writing, because I think it will instantly make your song sound more professional. And if you can nail a good melody, it just helps so much. I'm going to give myself a plug, but I'm doing a melody writing retreat for 2 days in March. You can get to it at athomesongwritingcourses.com. So that's athomesongwritingcourses.com. But it's 2 days. It's a Saturday and a Sunday, and we're going to spend like a lot of time focusing on that. So it's all online, so you can attend where you are, and it's just $157. So it'll be a good time. It'll be fun.
Also, we should probably touch on the. I guess I'll touch on the first question on best place to start learning music theory for great melodies, etc. And then, so great melodies. I think great melodies is a great example of write a lot of melodies, and to what Chad said, think about it. Try to work towards understanding phrases would be my advice. And so, for example, start with something where maybe the first song you write or the next song you write, you keep it simple and just do A, B, A, B, right? Where the first phrase and the third phrase match syllable-wise, emphasis-wise. The notes are the same because we're talking melody. And then 2 and 4. And then, just work on, all right, let's try a different one. Let's try AAB, AAB, or AAB, AAC for the chorus, maybe. Or you just do a whole song in ABAB and then try another one where you intentionally try a different pattern when it comes to your melody, because a lot of times it's just phrases and patterns. For example, a verse is your second verse and your first verse is the same thing over and over again, right? Like the melody is going to be the same or largely the same. And a lot of times too, even within that, it is something like A, B, A, B, where really there were just two phrases, but they each happened two times. Not every song, some songs, you know, admittedly, sometimes I like to have like an A, B, C, D where it kind of takes you on more of a journey. But especially if you want to write faster, something to do is definitely pare it down, keep it simple. Although I think there's something to be said for going again in both directions. Also, I see the question on guitars, which I'll answer quickly because so I have a LTD, I think it's called. Basically, it's I got it because it's what Breaking Benjamin uses, or close to what they use. It's a baritone electric guitar, which is for the harder rock stuff that I do, and also to help fill in the mix. I like having guitars that have different roles, so it's baritone and drop B. Then another one is just an Epiphone Les Paul, the blue one, which I don't think you can see technically. And that I keep a half step down, but otherwise standard tuning. And then I have half step down Nashville tuning for the third guitar. I don't even remember what it was because I got it for $50 from somebody and then paid a guitar guy to replace the parts and make it an actually good guitar. But also on the good songs thing, I think it was Chad that said, or one of you or both of you said, trust your gut, which I think is a large part of it, and trust the cringe for sure. Like Chad said, that right there is. I go farther and say, if you cringe even a little bit, don't ignore that. Because a lot of times I think we tend to like shove it aside, like, oh, it's fine, and we rationalize it. Don't. If you cringe a little bit, almost definitely there's something wrong. Sometimes maybe your cringe meter is wrong, but and then another thing that I like to do is really try to take one part of your song, isolate it, and then test it. So for instance, sometimes I'll talk about the frame test. The idea of the frame test is, to me, if your lyrics are good, they should pass as poetry, because sometimes lyrics seem like they're good, but the only reason it seems like they're good is, I don't know, Celine Dion is singing them and her voice is incredible and the arrangement's good and the melody's good. So really it just obfuscates the fact that the lyrics are actually really terrible. So to me, like, a good way to test that is, I call it the frame test, because the idea is you could print out your lyrics and try to imagine them framed on a wall. Would it pass as poetry? Like if somebody just read your lyrics without the crutch of your melody or the crutch of the rest of your music and how great your arrangement is it still good? Because if it is, then it's almost definitely good. And then do the same thing for your melody, where like, is your melody really powerful even without the lyrics? Is the melody powerful even without the chord progression helping it out? And then of course you can do it with the arrangement as well. Because your arrangement is interesting if you can take the vocal out of it and it's still interesting. I don't think it has to be. If any of them if any test I think is optional and you really don't have to do, is that one. But if you can take the vocal away and your arrangement is still interesting, then almost definitely it's a really interesting arrangement. So you can test it like that, which at least I found helpful.
Yeah, going back to that cringe thing, something I've even found that I've tried to embrace is, I found myself early on when I was writing songs, I like to, originally I was just writing music because I wanted new music to listen to that I enjoyed. So I want to write a song for myself that I like. And I found myself like skipping ahead to my favorite part. And I realized, oh, wait a minute. If I'm skipping ahead, that means I don't like these other parts as well. Even if they're not cringy, if you don't like them enough to skip to them, rewrite them. That's what I've done. And so I want to make sure that every part is good enough that I'd want to skip to that part and just listen to that part over and over.
There was a really good question. Jordan asked a question. What was our experience when we first realized we were interested in songwriting, and what was the process initially developing the skills? So for me, it was when I was a kid and I would listen to the radio and I would want to like do what they were doing. Like when I was a kid, I was really into the Pointer Sisters, which sounds funny, but like in the 80s, like their song Jump and like I'm So Excited, Automatic, like all of these songs were really initial influences for me. And so what I started to do was, like, I got a tape tape recorder actually, and I started singing just my own lyrics and songs into just a cassette tape recorder. I couldn't actually do music or anything, but it was just sort of like trying to figure out how do I make that sound. And then eventually I begged my parents for a keyboard, and I kind of taught myself how to play along with songs that I liked, and really just learned from imitation, I think, is how I started to learn. But then as an adult, did a lot more studying, went to Berkeley, have taken about every songwriting course that there is, written tons of songs. I've written thousands of songs over the years. I'm constantly writing, but that's kind of my start.
It's really cool. It's funny.
Reagan, you answering that next, or?
All right. It probably just stemmed from not having enough music, because I kind of just fell in love with music as a teenager and listened to a ton of music, and I just found there wasn't enough music that I liked, so I started writing my own music. So I had this one sales job in college where I had to go door to door selling, and it was so miserable that before I went out, I'd write myself a new song. So I guess that goes back to being forced to write quickly, but I'd write myself a song, put it on my phone, and then I'd listen to that song over and over again as I dropped flyers in people's mailboxes, and then the next day I'd be bored of that song, so I'd write a new song. And that's kind of how I got into it.
I feel like our journeys are a little more, because I feel like there's two journeys you hear a lot, and none of us quite fit into that mold. But mine is kind of a weird one, because I think a lot of people assume that it started with music and then went to lyrics. And for a lot of, I think it's because most songwriters are that, right? They're essentially musicians, and then they're like, I don't want to just cover songs, I want to have my own. So then, which I think is why a lot of people treat lyrics like second-class citizens, because they're musicians at heart. So naturally, a musician at heart is going to treat lyrics like a second-class citizen, whereas people who start as poets are not. Which, by the way, is another common type of songwriter, although way less common, at least from what I've seen in my experience. I've had maybe a couple people reach out to me and be like, "Hey, I was a poet first," but in my case, it was kind of both. So it was largely like Chad's story, where it started with just I knew there was something about certain artists that I listened to that resonated with me, and I thought I want to do that, not just singing their songs. I want to have my own. But growing up, I was in like all those like writing classes at the library, and then you get to be in this book, and you did short stories and poetry and all that. So I did poetry and all that, but I also was in piano lessons and guitar lessons. And eventually I realized that I wanted to pair those two things up, because I deeply care about words. I care about words a lot. Whether it's just an everyday speech and trying to be precise about what we're trying to say, or whether it be precision of a lyric, or well-written story, great storytelling, whatever it might be. But so in my case, I kind of came to it in a two-pronged way. It started with just rewriting lyrics for songs that existed, is how it started when I was like a kid, because I feel like it's really hard to, I feel like kids don't have that level of, because songwriting is not as simple as drawing, and I'm not diminishing drawing. Of course, that takes incredible talent and all that, but like it is something where a 5-year-old can get started easier than songwriting, because songwriting has multiple different arts put into one. Just like, movie making has multiple arts put into one. You're a writer, script writer. Also, you have to act in your own movie, and also you have to direct. You have to know how to work a camera. There's just a little more to it, but yeah. And then by 9th grade, that's when I wrote what I consider my first real official song, which no one will ever hear except my dad, who I think still has the CD, unfortunately. I have a copy too, which don't tell my wife, because she will probably want to try to listen to it.
Uh-oh, hope she's not watching. Christopher has a great question. I think that's something we've actually talked about in the past, but he asks, on next open mic, would you be willing to review some song submissions if sent a week in advance? Feedback from each of you would be appreciated. We'd all learn from it.
Yeah, I think that would be really cool. I also just realized I think we all ignored the second part of Jordan's question.
What was
the process of initially developing the skill? I just re-looked at it. I'm like,
Well, I think, well, for me, it was imitation, right? It was sort of like
Oh, yeah.
looking at how are people doing it and just trying to mimic what I heard. I think there's a lot of structure in songs that you can use, like where does the title fit in the chorus, or like what is just the song structure? Like whatever genre you listen to usually has some sort of pattern of verse, chorus, those types of things. I think that, so doing song reviews and song critiques, that's something that my online group At Home Songwriting does periodically, probably about once a quarter. We also do songwriting challenges where they get criteria that I give them, and then they have either a week or a month to write a song, and then we get together and we listen to them and give feedback. So that's something that we've done. It would be cool to do on a live like this, but we'd have to make sure that no one has released the music that we're reviewing already, because YouTube will ding us for copyright crap. So it would have to be an unreleased song. That would be something that we'd have to make sure of. But yeah, I think it'd be cool.
And we'd have to make sure to get the audio set up, because I know last time, I think it was, Reagan tried to play something and we couldn't hear it.
Yeah, I think I have to buy a plugin to allow that. I think.
And I saw that Technictone had a shout out for Berkeley too. So I teach lyric writing for Berkeley. So I studied with Berkeley before that, but I love Berkeley stuff.
So then my process for developing my skills was just writing a song a day, listening to a lot of music, laying awake at night wondering why my music sounded so bad and didn't sound like the music that I heard, trying to figure out what were they doing, trying to mimic them, and then since I couldn't sleep, writing another song that night. That was my process.
Yeah, I feel like I should talk about my process more. I just don't, because I usually have the attitude of I'm writing content to help people. They don't care about how I know what I know, which I think is flawed thinking, because I think sometimes it can help listening to how other people got there. But for me, and this will illuminate some of you who are like, he really believes in music theory, you'll see why. Because for me, like, it was kind of struggling through in 9th grade and 10th grade, writing stuff that was like, sometimes it worked, sometimes it just didn't work at all. And I had no idea, because it felt stilted and wrong musically. And even if the lyrics were okay, just the music it just didn't sound like something that would be something that I would listen to. And I didn't quite know how to get it right without sort of just copying chord progressions that other artists I knew did, which is really limiting. And I don't know, it gets boring fast to me anyway. So then in 11th grade and 12th grade is when I took music theory 1 and 2 and music composition 1 and 2. And to this day, that's probably the biggest overnight switch flip I've had for songwriting, where like I went from feeling like I got lucky if I got any song to sound right, to now I'm concerned about details, right? Like I can sit at the keyboard, not because I'm a great pianist or anything, but just because I understand music theory. I can sit at the keyboard and just improvise something that sounds pretty good. So it's more about like the details, and when you are at a point where you can worry about the details musically instead, it's so helpful, right? Because if I sit and improvise for an hour after learning music theory, like it's just what's the best idea I had in the hour, not like, oh, let me pray to God that I get something that works. Like everything that I do now works for the most part. Not again because I have any skill or anything. It's just basic music theory, right? I know, oh, I'm in G major, so here are the notes I have. And yes, I know, like, oh, an interesting borrowed chord might be a major 2 chord here or whatever. But and then from there, so getting to the advice side of it, I would highly advise, don't fall into one of 2 traps. One, don't overwhelm yourself with music theory or any other knowledge. The best way to learn is to do, which both of the other 2 have touched on. But be intentional about learning along the way, because I think there's 2 traps you can get into. You can get into the trap of only doing, right? So I'll relate it to YouTube. You could just make YouTube videos and never watch Think Media or somebody else that like maybe can give you tips that will get you to make better videos faster. Eventually you'll learn, but it might take you 10 years, and it could have taken you 2 if you learn from people who already went through what you went through. But the other mistake is overwhelming yourself with too much knowledge. And I had somebody reach out to me on this. It might have been when I sent out the poll asking what your number one songwriting struggle was. But also don't be the person that's like, I don't know enough to start songwriting. I don't know enough music theory. I got to learn all the music theory. Don't do that either. Every single person watching this, you know enough to start. Go write a song. If you think you don't know enough to write a song, you're wrong. You do know enough. You might not be as equipped to write as many various songs. The variation in song you can write and the depth of song you write might not be today what it will be 5 years from now, but that's okay. That's okay, right? Just add one thing at a time. Don't overwhelm yourself and be like, I gotta take 5 music theory courses before I write a song. Don't do that. Just one step at a time. Learn and then do.
Absolutely zero music theory when I got started. I didn't even know what chords were until months in. I didn't know what the notes on a keyboard were, and I still wrote tons of songs. Now they were awful, but I still got started and I got excited, and that's what allowed me to keep going and to learn and to get better.
No one, like absolutely no one starts great.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't happen.
Although Joshua Radin's best song, I still think, is the first one he ever wrote, which is crazy. Winter. Go check it out, people. It's good stuff. But
you heard it here first.
You're 100% right there, Chad.
Joseph says your first song is going to be your best.
Yeah, that's definitely what I said. But no, Chad, you're 100% right. I just figured I'd throw that out there. It's a good song.
So Nick asked a question and said, what notes do different sections usually start or end with? What notes are usually left out of each section in terms of tonic, dominant, etc.? I honestly, when I'm writing, I don't even think about that. It's all by feel. It's all by like what sounds the best. Any chord that you have in your progression, you can either use chordal tones or non-chordal tones, right? So each one is going to give a different level of balance and resolution. And I think what you choose depends on the emotion of what you're trying to say. If you're saying something that's very, very balanced and very, very like certain and resolved, then you will probably want to start on the tonic because that's as resolved and as focused as you can get. But as far as like, what are there rules? There's absolutely no rules. For me, I think
also not really guidelines.
And there's really not guidelines either. No.
Maybe the
now in classical compositions
more so probably.
What's that?
For chords more so. That I don't know what they mean by notes, but if they mean like melodically, there's like literally no rules at all or guidelines at all. But when it comes to like chords, I think there's more. Like, for example, an easy hack for a pre-chorus is just avoid the one chord, aka the tonic. You don't have to, but it is an easy hack to make a pre-chorus not sound like the chorus that you can utilize. But still, it's like, don't hear that as a rule. Maybe it's a guideline at best.
If all else fails, follow your ears. Do what sounds good.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And again, learn from imitation. Like, what do your favorite songs do? What are they starting in a chordal tone? Are they starting off the chord? Are they starting on the ninth? A lot of pop songs are like heavily centered on the ninth of the scale. Like, do they have to? No, but in a lot of songs, it sounds cool. I think one of the things that people get caught up in is learning like rules. And I think, Joseph, you said it, where it's like, once you know a little bit of theory, you know options. Yeah. So you know what spices you might be able to add to the dish.
Yeah. And music theory won't give you rules, by the way. If you think that your music theory gives you rules, then you don't know what music theory is. Music theory is just going to give you like some parameters to understand that give you clarity on, like for instance, if you just understand like, okay, C major just has if you're on a piano, just all the white keys, right? That just is going to help you that that if you just hit all the white keys and all the chords you use are white keys, like you have limited yourself to only stuff that for the most part is going to work. That doesn't mean you can't break outside of that. In fact, I think intentionally at some point, maybe even you should, for maybe a borrowed chord or whatever it might be. I don't think it's necessary. Tons of songs don't. Most songs don't. But don't hear that music theory is rules so much as it gives you like templates of these notes together will work well, or as Chad was talking about, the one or the tonic is resolved, right? that's a tendency where, like, yeah, if you want your song at the end of it to sound resolved, the one chord is the way to go. And if you're playing a chord and you're like, my song doesn't sound like it's over, but I want it to sound like it's over, music theory is something that would help you, because it would explain, like, oh, well, I'm playing the 4 chord, so that's why it doesn't sound resolved. If I play the 1 chord in root position, then it will sound resolved. If I play it in first inversion, it probably won't sound resolved. But if I do it in root position, it probably will. And if all that was Spanish to you or whatever language you don't know, that's okay, right? Like, just learn it slowly.
I think the key word in music theory is theory too, right? Like it's just a bunch of tendencies, and it's what we think of as music theory is actually like a European centric focus on music.
Mm-hmm.
If you study other cultures, like in India, they have different notes that fall outside of what like the Western scales and stuff would be. So there's a whole other theory that they have. It's a whole other theory that, you know, other countries might have, or other scales and different ways that they have instrumentation. Like music theory is really just studying the relationships between pitches and rhythm, right? Like that's what it really comes down to. Jeanette said she took a theory class at Columbia College where they used a fountain pen and wrote on staff. So like I've written thousands of songs and I can't read music. So you don't even have to know how to read music to do this stuff.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Chad.
Yeah.
But yeah. PSA, based on what Chad just said, in case he wasn't abundantly clear, which I think he was, but let's make it even more clear. Music theory has nothing to do with sheet music. Nothing at all. You can know nothing about sheet music and still know everything about music theory. And you can know everything about sheet music and know nothing about music theory. Totally disconnected. I knew how to read sheet music since I was like 6 because I took classical piano lessons. Didn't know a lick of music theory when I took my first class. And I knew how to read music, and not even just like vocal music, right? Like 2 hands doing multiple things. Piano, like there's nothing harder than reading piano sheet music. I don't think. Organ probably, but basically, right? Like the flute players out there, like you have an easier time, right? You have to read one note. A pianist has to read a whole bunch. So even as somebody who had to do that, I didn't know a lick of music theory. None. Going into 11th grade, at which point I had done over 10 years of piano lessons. So I certainly knew how to read sheet music. Not that great at it because I memorized songs too quickly and I regret that greatly. But just so everyone knows, music theory has nothing to do with sheet music. Also a thing about that Reagan said that I think is worth calling back. Feel. I don't remember if I've already put a video out about this or if I just have one planned, but I noticed a recurring theme with people talking about their biggest struggle. And one of those recurring themes was getting so caught up in rules or tendencies or what other artists are doing to forget to trust your own gut and to forget to just, if it feels right, it probably is right. If you break slightly outside of the meter for one line, right? There's no rule that if you start in common meter, so you have 4 emphases, 3 emphases, 4 emphases, 3 emphases. If you break that rule, it's okay because your rhyme scheme serves your lyric. Your everything is in service to your song. Break any rule if it ever doesn't service your song. If some music theory rule or some music composition rule or something that a schmuck like me said on YouTube or these other 2 brilliant guys, if we always go with what is right for your song and throw any rule or any guideline immediately out the window if it's not in service to your song, including a rhyme scheme, or like there's been songs where I had a rhyme scheme and it just, there was one line where I'm like, no, it shouldn't have it. It needs to say this. And you know what? Nobody's going to notice either. So make sure it's all in service to your song.
Great advice. Yeah, that's what it really boils down to. Are you able to create? Does the song create? Does it do what it's supposed to do? Right? Music, lyrics. It's all meant that music. It's meant to communicate. It's a form of communication. It communicates ideas through the lyrics. The music itself communicates emotions. It's like a shorthand. It's a way to transfer emotions to someone. So does it make you dance? If the song's supposed to make you dance, does it make you feel sad? Does it make you feel contemplative if that's what it's supposed to do? So if it's doing what it's supposed to do, then you're probably in the right ballpark there. So we should probably wrap up here. I did see Technic Tone had this good question that I've been thinking a lot recently about how to get feedback. So that would be really useful. I think he's talking about us reviewing songs. So for sure, I think that's something we should do going forward. Another thing to keep in mind about feedback, though, is be careful. Sometimes feedback can be a bad thing because you want to make sure you're getting feedback from the right people, meaning the people that like the kind of music that you create, right? So someone could send me a country song to listen to. I'm probably not going to like it because I don't like country
I'm in
music.
the same boat.
That's the same thing for like any business, right? If you're trying to market your product to the wrong audience, it's not going to sell. It doesn't mean you have a bad product. It just means it's not the right audience. So you want to make sure you're getting feedback from the right people. And so hopefully we're the ones for that, right? Probably if you're following us, you probably like the kind of music that we create or have talked about. So hopefully we can provide some good feedback in the future live stream.
And just one last thing on that: try to find people that can separate their as much as possible their own biases from what they think
Preferences,
is preferences versus because there are some things, right, that I think are just more objectively better or worse, and then there are other things that I think this is a subjective thing. Do you like lyrics that are a little more clean cut and like last example, but like even depending on the genre I write, the harder rock stuff tends to be way more symbolic and vague than my singer-songwriter stuff, because I think it just fits the music, or the lyrics tend to be way darker for that because it sounds like darker music. So also try to find people that are going to see through whatever bias or whatever their preferences are, and at least try to help you with what you're trying to accomplish. Because your goal is not to write a song that they would approve of, what I would approve of Reagan or anybody else, but to write the song to the best of your ability that is what you are trying to go for, which is not trivial, but if you can find that would be helpful.
But yeah, you could try, right? Go on Instagram and see people that follow your favorite artist that makes music like yours, and look at the people that are commenting on their stuff, and maybe just send them a message and say, hey, I really like this artist too. I make music that I think kind of sounds like theirs. Would you mind listening to it and telling me what you think? Right? Because you're not really like promoting like, hey, go listen to my music. You're asking them for feedback. That's something you could try too, so that you know you're reaching out to the people that are in the same kind of music that you like.
But asking a stranger, you kind of risk them being a total jerk on the internet too.
Yeah,
so
you gotta be open to that.
I think
I do door-to-door sales, so I'm used to rejection. I'm used to people screaming and running when they see me coming. So
I think what you have to do is you have to take in all of the feedback and not instantly react to it either. Like if somebody says this part could be a different way, stop and think, like, is that just because they would have done it in a different way, or is there actually something that's quote unquote wrong with it, right? Like if somebody comes to you and says, what the hell just happened in the second verse? Like, I don't get it. That's different feedback than, oh, I would have used a different rhyme there, right? Like, is it communicating the right thing? What is the favorite song they've written? Where can we go hear it?
It's probably a good wrap-up question.
Yeah, I mean, just search for my name, Chad Shank, on any of the streaming sites, and you'll see stuff that I like that I've put out. I could not name a favorite song of mine. I have too many. It depends on the day. Yeah,
it was a tough one. I would probably my favorite songs that I've written aren't published yet.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. All my favorite 15 to 20 of my favorites are not published yet.
I will say I just finished writing a song that ironically I wrote like 7 years ago but never finished. So Joseph, I needed time to brew. And so I went back to it just recently and then finished it up. And so I'm just working on putting the final touches on that and hoping to release that at the end of this month, maybe the beginning of next month. And that might be my favorite song that I've written up to this point in time. Otherwise, you can look me up at Andromeda Coast, and that's on Spotify and all the other streaming platforms.
For me, I reflect what Reagan said, probably my 20 favorite songs were all not released. It's dangerously close to that. And some of songs that I've released are currently not able to be found because I wrote them when I was 18, and I just I don't have the heart to put them back up. But of the available ones, my favorite is probably "Won't Be Tonight," although I have a bias to it. That is the song that for me magically came together in half an hour. So that kind of has a special place in my heart for that reason. It just was like the perfect something happened to me for the first time in my life, and after crying for like 50 hours and watching Everybody Loves Raymond for 50 hours, I finally was like, I'm a songwriter. I probably should use this and write a song, shouldn't I? So "Won't Be Tonight" is my favorite. I just have a channel, Joseph Vidala Music, with not as much published as I should have. But other people tend to like "Sick Machine," which is a little more of the rock side of what I do. And a lot of people like "Hello Reality," which I think is a great sarcastic lyric. I'm proud of that lyric, but it's like a poppy experiment song. It literally was me be like, can I write a poppy catchy song? Because I'm so sick of just being always like emotional and big
Angsty.
melodies. Well, not always angsty, but certainly more. I go for sad feels more than I do happy ones for sure. And this one is like a happy song, or seems like a happy song, but really it's a pretty savage song.
Yeah, I like a good.
For some
sad
reason,
song.
people like that. A good what?
A good sad song. Those are always nice.
Yeah,
I enjoy those.
I agree. Actually, that reminds me of a discussion topic that maybe we can have next time.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Well, this was
Curiosity.
fun, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone who tuned in. It was great. You made the stream amazing with all your comments. So thank you so much for tuning in, and pay attention to your inboxes because we might be emailing you before the next one to look for song submissions to review. So stay tuned. And Tecumseh's asking, when is the next live stream? I don't think we have one
We'll have to
scheduled.
figure that out.
We try to do
Yeah.
one a month if possible. So
Yeah, that was the idea anyway. We'll see.
we missed December.
I think we can maybe promise once a quarter at least, probably. Hopefully.
Yeah, I've got some other live streams with other songwriters and stuff on my channel, but for this one, we don't have anything else set up yet.
Yeah.
But we can change that.
Yeah. Also, let us know. Like, it's hard to know how many people care, or because I know more people watch. Maybe in the future, more people are watching than are commenting, probably. So let us know via email. You know, if you really are like, I love live streams, please keep doing them. / here's ideas for them. Let us know, because I think everybody always assumes that we know how much people like stuff, but we don't. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't tell us, we don't. And everybody always assumes like, oh, they must get like tons of feedback. Not as much as you'd think. You'd be surprised with a decent sized, whether it's email list or subscribers or whatever, how little people will tell you about any given thing, right? So for instance, the only feedback I've gotten about the live stream is actually via Chad. Somebody let Chad know. Literally, I don't think I've gotten a single email saying whether they hate the live stream,
the flying cat.
They think Reagan's face looks funny. They think I look awful with the camera that I choose. I haven't gotten any feedback. I look like a fool. My hairdo's stupid. I don't know.
I think I got my first compliment from they liked my hair in one of my YouTube shorts. That was like the first compliment I've ever gotten.
Nice. Nice.
Hey, that's a good compliment.
And my wife cuts my hair, so that's gotta give her the credit.
I just can't imagine watching a video of somebody like talking about not hair and being like, "Nice hair, bro." You know what I mean?
Their picture was Yoda, so I'm like, "Oh, I really like your skin. Nice shade of green."
Green.
Awesome.
Joseph, get more guitars. Tell my wife. I'll tell my wife that I need to get more guitars, because Tecumseh Thorpe, which is that's such a cool YouTube name, by the way. Unless it's your real name, which would be extra cool. But I just assume it's not. It doesn't seem like it could be, but you never know. But
I have on good authority it's not their real name.
I figured it wasn't.
I think I know who Tecumseh Thorpe is.
I figure it wasn't, but it's a sweet YouTube name. It's very cool.
Anyway, thanks so much. Thanks so much, and thank you, Chad and Joseph. It's always fun chatting. I liked controversy. Hopefully, you guys did too, because I like getting into those kinds of discussions.
Hey, I have an idea that we should everyone start with something we disagree with, because I think it makes it more interesting. That, and everybody gets to pick and choose like what they think is best from Because some people are going to lean more towards my way and some are going to lean more towards you guys' way. I don't think either is right or wrong necessarily, but I think everyone can learn from everybody's perspective. But anyway, you're trying to wrap up.
Yes. Anyway, have a great night.
So
See you around. Be sure to subscribe to Joseph and Shad. They've got great channels that will help you write better music. Have a great night, everyone.
Bye.
See you, friend.